The Locked On NFL Top 100 is out, and, well, we've got some issues. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien, and we've been covering the Cincinnati Bengals here on Locked On Bengals since 2016. And with training camp right around the corner, we will finish our training camp previews here as we start next week, right before training camp opens. We've got to get to the rest of the defense, but before we do that, James, Locked On NFL Top 100 came out on Wednesday. We're recording this here on Thursday, and, well, we need to react. There are some problems. We need to dive into those problems. Some of the things that maybe we would have done a little bit differently here as we look at the NFL Top 100. Welcome back to all the everydayers out there who make Locked On Bengals part of their daily routine. We appreciate all of you very much, and if you're not part of that club yet, you can hit the subscribe button on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On Bengals. And shout out to all the first listeners out there who make Locked On Bengals their first listen as well. James, as you saw this top 100, there's some, from the jump, some things jumped out at me. What jumped out to you right away?
Well, you instantly think, all right, well, where's Joe Burrow? I think that's just where the conversation begins when you talk about these top 100s, and he's too low. Joe Burrow's fifth, too low. And that's not a ton, by a ton, but certainly too low. And this isn't just a quarterbacks thing. Lamar Jackson 1, Mahomes 2, Josh Allen 3. But you have Myles Garrett 4 ahead of Joe. The Cleveland Browns would trade all of their draft picks and Myles Garrett, all of their draft picks for the next 2 seasons in Myles Garrett right now for Joe Burrow. They wouldn't think twice, and they would be smiling as the deal went through. Like there's really no scenario where whether it's value or who's better, that Joe, coming off the season that he had last year, he's better than Myles Garrett. So are we splitting hairs a little bit because he's still 5th in the rankings? Maybe. I don't think it's a huge deal. But before you even say, oh, well, Joe's better than this quarterback or that quarterback, you look and you're like, man, Myles Garrett? So, yeah, that one does surprise me because I did not anticipate any non-quarterback being ahead of Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would get into the quarterback rankings and would want to talk, especially Bengals fans, especially our audience is going to sit there and say, man, Lamar Jackson is number 1 in the NFL? And honestly, I get it. I don't necessarily. I think if you put those quarterbacks in any order in the top 4, if you're ranking quarterbacks, I think you can make a good argument for it. I think you are splitting hairs. I think there are arguments for Joe. I think there are arguments for Lamar. I think there are arguments for Mahomes. I think there are arguments for Josh Allen. And I think that that's being pretty objective about it. When you get Myles Garrett in there, that's where you start to have the, okay, how much are we weighing positional value in these exercises? Because obviously positional value matters. If you look at the rest of the list, the positions that are more valuable are more represented in this list. There's more quarterbacks than any other position, or maybe more wide receivers than any other position, more quarterbacks than any position after that. Wide receivers, obviously a very glorious position, gets a lot of attention. But when you look at this list, or you look at the NFL 100, you see that positional value is kind of there, but then you get stuff like this where people are like, okay, yeah, I think Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the NFL, and so we're going to put him ahead of a quarterback for some people. Obviously, some people must have voted that way for that to be the case. Also, I think Joe Burrow has haters. There are people that don't think Joe Burrow is very good at quarterback, and they're out there. I think most reasonable observers of the NFL game see those 4 quarterbacks kind of in their own tier. Maybe some of them will put Pat Mahomes still in a tier of his own, but those 4 guys, and then there's a cliff, right? But if you're going to make an argument for best player on the Bengals, I've seen some people do this. Some people say, well, Jamar's better at wide receiver than Joe is a quarterback. I've seen that argument out there. And if you want to make that argument that Myles Garrett is a better defensive end than Joe Burrow as a quarterback, I guess you can make that argument, but it gets really weird when you start to try to compare across positions, across sides of the ball. Anyway, I overall agree with you. I think that while we're splitting hairs here a little bit, Myles Garrett at 4 ahead of Joe Burrow, when you take into account like all the things that go into this sort of list, definitely a surprise.
The absolute bottom for Joe should have been 4th. And so he's 5th instead of 4th. It's not a huge deal, but it is a deal. And it is surprising. I'm glad you brought up Jamar as well, because this is one where maybe you think, he's going to be the first non-quarterback mentioned and on the list. And wouldn't have shocked me if that was the case. But it wasn't the case, because you have Joe Burrow 5 after Myles Garrett at 4. Then it's Justin Jefferson at 6, Jamar Chase at 7, Micah Parsons 8, Patrick Surtain the 2nd, 9, Saquon Barkley 10. Jamar at 7 on the surface, you say, he's the 7th best player in the league. That doesn't really offend me. I'm not bothered by that. I do think it's interesting, though, that Myles is ahead of him, because I'm not sure Myles should be ahead of him. And the Justin Jefferson one, I get it. Justin Jefferson's amazing, but I would take Jamar over Justin. And I think most NFL teams would as well, even though, again, Justin's amazing, and we're talking about the 2 top receivers in the league.
Yeah, I think just about and I think all of the lists are out except the NFL, like the NFL official, the NFL Network, whatever you want to call it, their top 100. But ESPN's receivers are out. We've seen a few receiver rankings in the last week, and I think there's unanimity right now that coming off a Triple Crown year, that goes to Jamar. Even if you think they're tied, the tiebreaker is Jamar Chase just won the Triple Crown. And even if you think, Justin Jefferson's a better route runner or does this better than Jamar, that better than Jamar, and he does, they're different players. They have different strengths in their game. I think Justin is a better route runner, and he's awesome. So again, splitting hairs here, but Triple Crown should be a trump card, right? At some point. And so we got a couple of spots here where maybe it's only one spot, maybe it's only one ranking, but you react to the players that are just ahead of the Bengals stars in the top 10. And that's really what gets your attention here. For sure. And there's nothing wrong with being 5th and 7th. I just think it's a tad low when you look at who's ahead of these guys. And fine, if you go with Justin versus Jamar, I would say this, and it hasn't really needed to come up, but there hasn't been an age when they were the same age that Justin was better than Jamar. And I'll say it, just when they're the same age at their respective ages, Jamar has always been better. So you're looking to clarify that, because it took me a second to figure out what you're saying. That's essentially like 1 year in the past for Justin versus Jamar's current year, because Justin was always a little bit older, right? Yeah.
Jamar at 19 was the number 1 receiver at LSU, and Justin was right there with him, no doubt. And they were throwing it all over the field, but Jamar was just dominant at 19. Was Justin dominant at 19? No, he was good, not dominant. It's just different. And their rookie years, well, Jamar had a better rookie year. He got nicked up a little bit, dealt with a few injuries, and then Justin did as well. And I think it was his 4th season when that happened. So like that's part of it. Like at age 21, Jamar slightly better than Justin. At age 22, and that's kind of how I view it. I think he's more explosive. Justin's amazing, but they're different. And outside of Minnesota, I think most people would give Jamar the edge. Now, this changes quickly. Both are awesome. Am I going to riot because Justin's ahead of Jamar in these rankings? No, but I think Jamar's the better player.
I think if Justin Jefferson had won a Triple Crown last year, you can't really make that argument.
No,
Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown at wide receiver last year.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, from Offensive Player of the Year voting to these rankings to who knows what else, he doesn't seem to get as much credit for that. Is it because there's an orange helmet with black stripes on it on Jamar Chase and just a Bengals bias out there in the world? I think a lot of people think so, James. Let's keep working our way through this list, through some of our issues with this list, and some players that are absent, some players that are present, and it's a shock. We'll continue coming up next.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch is more than a budgeting app. It's a financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. In addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth with Monarch Money. Busy season's about to start for me, obviously for us here on Locked On Bengals. And when football season is here, things get chaotic. The last thing you want to think about are your finances, where things are. Monarch Money can combine everything into one app. So you don't have to go into a bunch of different apps. You can manage your money with your partner easy. And right now you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money and save 50% off your first year by using code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Just to wrap up thoughts here on the top 10, James, if you were going to put any defensive player ahead of Jamar Chase, and you had to pick, this is the player I think was the best defensive player in the NFL last year. What was your vote? What's your thought there? Like, because what jumps out to me is the defensive player of the year, Patrick Surtain,
yeah,
is ranked behind Jamar, and those guys had a head-to-head matchup. So, is that one that you would even start to? And I know we're a Bengals podcast here, but is that one that you would start to consider? Instead of Myles Garrett or maybe Micah Parsons, you think is too low at number 8?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make the argument certainly that Surtain is the best defensive player, and he's reigning defensive player of the year, but should be the first ranked defensive player. Now, where would that be? Instead of 9, it's probably 6 or 7. I think the top 5 would be probably 4 quarterbacks and Jamar for me. And then you go from there, and then you have Justin and Patrick Surtain and then Myles, like they're all in that. But again, we're talking a few spots, but I think when you look at what he did last year, what he meant to that Denver defense, a really good defense, really kind of surprising to see him behind Micah Parsons, to be honest with you. And I think Micah's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Surtain had the better year and has certainly racked up the not just the resume, but the reputation that he's by far the top cornerback in the NFL.
My theory on this, to some degree, is PFF grades are a problem here. PFF grades really are on a different scale for edge players than they are for corners. Like, the best edge player every year is going to be a number higher than 90 in PFF system. The best corner is not always a number higher than 90. Pat Surtain last year was I think 85. And so I think that even though it's just PFF grades, I think that gets into people's heads and starts to, and there are arguments that edge players are more valuable than individual corners. But I think that kind of perpetuates that idea to a point where, again, here's where positional value gets kind of like half baked into this thing, right? Where you see the difference between edge players and the best corner in the NFL, and like, how do you differentiate those? It's tough. And I do get that about top 100s in general. It can be really tough to split hairs and break ties, but I know that I voted for Jamar Chase to be ahead of Justin Jefferson, and Joe Burrow would have been ahead of any defensive player. And again, maybe that's because I value quarterback the way I do.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
You know what else I also would have made sure I did, and I did make sure I did when I voted for this, is T. Higgins, top 100 player in the NFL. Right?
Should be.
Right?
Should be.
Doesn't make this list.
Didn't make it.
And when you look at some of the other players that did make this list, it's a real head scratcher. I mean, they're all good players, don't get me wrong. But man, Like, we'll dive into some of the individuals that made this list instead of T. Higgins, and it's gonna leave you wondering.
T. Higgins is without a doubt a top, let's say 15 receiver. He's definitely in the top 20 if you want to stretch it. Definitely a top 20 receiver in the league. I'd probably have him in the top 15. He had double-digit touchdowns last year in 12 games. Was a huge reason why they won that Denver game and kept their season alive. And you just know, like when you talk to people around the league, you know how respected he is and how scary it is when both of those guys, Jamar and T, are on the field together. And so even with the injuries, I think without a doubt he's a top 100 player. And I believe teams feel that way too. There were teams just their mouths were watering about the idea of paying T. Higgins huge money and adding T. Higgins to their team. And it wasn't just one team, it was a bunch of teams that were going to be in on him. And obviously the Bengals tagged him. They were always trying to keep him in Cincinnati, really from December on, it felt like. And they were able to do so. And I know teams were bummed. And so we think he's a top 100 player. I think most NFL teams would have him as a top 100 player, even though he's not in the top 100 on this list.
I wonder if it would have been different had he signed that mega deal with some other team to be their wide receiver one. You know, like if some team had paid him the $33 million a year,
the
would it be
Patriots
different?
had T. Higgins. Yeah, it might be.
Would people see it as like, oh yeah, he's being paid to be number one? Obviously, he's the number one. Instead, I wonder if there's some. I think that the hamstrings are part of it. The leg issues that he's had, the leg muscle strains that have caused him to miss time. But I think another part of it is people, for better or worse, and this is me speculating here. I think that when you talk about receivers and running backs, probably as well, probably tight ends too, there's this fantasy football thinking that gets into people's evaluations of players, right? I think that's inevitable at some point for a lot of people. And I wonder if that's part of it for T as well, seeing that he is going to be a 1B. He isn't going to be the 180 target, that's maybe too big of a number, but he's not going to be that much of a target hog in his offense that also has several other mouths to feed. And I think that could be part of the perception on T. Higgins that goes into this as well.
Yeah. I think it's a unique situation when you look and you see, all right, well, there's Jamar, arguably the top receiver in the league. I say arguably because he's not based on this list. And then you have T there. And then, for example, let's use, the man of the week for the Jets. I mean, they get a deal done with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson has 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Garrett Wilson also averages like just around 10 yards per catch, and he gets peppered with targets. T. Higgins is sometimes that second option or that third option, depending on the play. Definitely second most of the time behind Jamar. And he's still putting up numbers. And I have no doubt that he would have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons if he was the only guy, even with the injuries, because he's big, strong, fast, physical, all of those things. And so you see Garrett Wilson 79th on this list, and it's like, okay, fine. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong or that he shouldn't be on the list. And we can get into guys that shouldn't. But how close are T. Higgins and Garrett Wilson? Like, I think that's close. I think that there are teams, including the Bengals, that evaluated T, had T higher on their draft board, and still probably believe T is the better player. And so if Garrett Wilson's 79th, T should probably be in the mix in that range, even if he's a little lower than Wilson.
And that one's reasonable to me. Like, it's reasonable to me that Garrett Wilson is where he is on this list.
Sure.
What we're about to get to, and we got to talk about where Trey is on this list too, but what we're about to get to is there's some stuff on this list that is not reasonable to me. And I just want to talk to him, man. I just want to know what happened. Anyway, we'll get to some of my
fired up
issues with the rest of this top 100 and Trey Hendrickson's placement to finish the show coming up next.
All right, let's give Trey his flowers, and then I'm going to give you the floor, and you can go off on this list. So Trey Hendrickson ranked 20th on this list, which I thought was honestly, I was surprised he was as high as he was. I think that's a heck of a ranking. To your point, I think part of this has to do with all the contract stuff. He's in the news, NFL sack leader, second in defensive player of the year voting. And so since he's certainly coveted by other teams, I think maybe this helped him get into the top 20, but good for Trey. He sneaks into a top 20 that starts with TJ Watt at 11, Chris Jones at 12, Penei Sewell at 13, Derrick Henry 14, Max Crosby 15, AJ Brown, by the way, too low, I think, for my money at 16, Nick Bosa 17, Lane Johnson 18, CeeDee Lamb 19, Trey Hendrickson 20. Jake, how surprised were you to see Trey in the top 20?
I guess I wasn't extremely surprised necessarily to see Trey in the top 20 by himself, but there are some surprises in general. Like it does feel a little bit higher than I thought he would be, but I do think you're right that all the attention on Trey Hendrickson and, he was in the defensive player of the year voting near the top of that list, the 17 and a half sacks in 2 straight years, that catches people's attention. But ahead of Tristan Wirfs, who I think should be ahead of Penei Sewell as well, but ahead of Tristan Wirfs, who I know is dealing with an injury at the start of the year, ahead of Jordan Mailata, ahead of Aiden Hutchinson, who again is coming off an injury. You can make some arguments there. Dexter Lawrence, who again is coming off an injury, but like Hutchinson and Lawrence, to me, and maybe even Jalen Carter, when those guys are going, they can be just as much, if not more, game wreckers than Trey is. So I think this is just a lot of respect for Trey Hendrickson. I don't necessarily disagree with the placement because of what he's done for the last 2 years, the performances that he's had, but it is a bit of a surprise, I guess, insofar as what happened with Joe and Jamar and those nitpicks that we had about those rankings and who went just ahead of them. And again, here's my conspiracy, is that since those guys are under contract with the Bengals, there's that anti-Bengals bias there. But Trey, since there's this argument and everyone else is like, no, we want Trey. I want Trey on my team. It pushes Trey up a little bit because Trey is like taking the stance against the Bengals. So that gets him more public sentiment from the voters here.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that could certainly be a factor. And I don't think he's like egregiously too high. Like I would have expected him in the top 30. And when this exercise was being completed, I thought about it and I was like, one, I did ask myself, like, is T going to make it? And then 2, are the Bengals going to have 3 guys around the top 30 and 2 guys in the top 10? And obviously I thought that should be the case, but it shows how top heavy things are because those are the 4 guys and there really isn't anyone else that you're like, oh, well, they have a real shot to make any top 100 list. But I think that Trey is probably in that 25 to 30 range. And maybe when the NFL top 100 comes out, he's in that range. Maybe he's lower than that. I'd be surprised if he's lower than that, though. I think so. Joe's a spot lower. Jamar probably a spot or two lower than I expected. And then Trey a few spots higher than I expected. But it's nothing egregious, super egregious, I would say, based on what I was thinking I would see coming in. But you weren't expecting to see a kicker, and a kicker made the list. And I'm going to just take a step back here, go off on all of the issues you had. Basically, it feels like mostly with guys that made the list in the bottom 50 or so, 40 or 50 players from 50 to 100.
Just tells me that we need to improve our process next year when we do this. But when we look at the Bengals that are included here, just to wrap up on the Bengals, it's just it feels like it's missing T. I'm not saying it should be anybody else considered here, but Joe Burrow at 5, Jamar Chase at 7, Trey Hendrickson at 20, and then nothing else. I mean, I agree with you. It's a top-heavy roster, but the players that were included at the back of this list that I take a significant issue with. One, Travis Hunter makes this list. Travis Hunter comes in at 67, and so far. And we've got reactions across the network. Joe Marino did a great job over at Locked On Bills reacting to some of this stuff as well. That's one of the ones that I've watched before we recorded this one, James. But Travis Hunter hasn't played in the NFL. I get that you might think Travis Hunter is going to be awesome right away. I don't think that any rookie can ever be on an NFL top 100 list because you just don't know who that player is yet. That's just a philosophical stance that I've taken. What do you think about that? Just to start before we get into a couple of these others.
It's the safe way to go. I think. Look, do I think Joe Burrow was a top 100 player as a rookie? And would I have been confident in putting him on it? Probably, but there aren't many guys like that. And I think that's tough. Like even Jamar was navigating life early on and it figured it out, by the way, before week 1. But what if Travis Hunter, what if it takes him half the season? Doesn't mean he's not going to be a great player. So yeah, I was surprised to see him on this list. And that's another example. Like T. Higgins today, there's really not a debate, is a better NFL player than Travis Hunter. And like, I don't even know who would debate that, but T. Higgins not on the list. Travis Hunter, 67th. That's it's not 97, 67.
Yeah. I would maybe get it if it was like 100. And it's like,
Sure.
okay.
You just sneak him in.
I think Travis Hunter is probably one of the best 100 players in the NFL, but I'm not that confident because he hasn't played in the NFL yet, but I want to put him on the list because I think he's going to be awesome. 100, fine. Somebody very confident in Travis Hunter's rookie prospects to make him a top 100 player in the NFL already. And he very well could be. We could revisit this and Travis Hunter could hit the ground running and be awesome right away and be the unicorn that he is. And that could translate to the NFL. Fine. I hope he does. I think that'd be really fun. But I think that when you're ranking players for a top 100 list of NFL players, it's got to be based on NFL achievements. To me, that's just a philosophical take that I have. A couple others that are pretty glaring to me. We have a kicker in the list, James.
76.
76. And he was, I don't even know if he was the best kicker in the NFL last year. Brandon Aubrey from Dallas. I don't even think, I'm all for giving specialists their flowers, but I don't know how you compare a kicker to 77 Bobby Wagner or 72 Khalil Mack, both of whom I'm not sure should necessarily. Khalil Mack was really good last year, but both of whom I'm not sure I would have in my top 100. I don't think I did have in my top 100. Maybe Khalil Mack was up there, but how does a kicker get into this list? And like, how are you even comparing a kicker's ability against non-specialists? They almost need their own list altogether.
He is an awesome kicker, but it's tough. It's tough because, again, I'll just keep going back to T. The Cowboys would trade multiple picks in Brandon Aubrey for T. Higgins right now, and they'd find another kicker. It's, I mean, it would multiple day 1, day 2 type picks, not the 7th round picks. So I think it was surprising. Now he's awesome. He's good. 14 of 17 from 50 plus and 2 all pro seasons, 1 first team all pro in back-to-back years. Like he's really good, but I would get prime Justin Tucker making this list because he was such a weapon. And I guess you could argue that Aubrey's similar, but I just don't get that same feeling like you did when Tucker came onto the field in his prime. You knew it was going in. And whether it was from 55, regardless of the hash, it doesn't matter, regardless of the situation. So I think you need to be a really special kicker because of the position to be on this list.
I guess did Tucker make the top 100s when the NFL did it in the past? I feel like he did at some point.
I think
it
he
was
did
a thing.
I'm going to check now.
So maybe we're going to look foolish. Maybe Brandon Aubrey is going to be the next GOAT kicker in the NFL, and he's just going to be awesome forever. He's had
Tucker was 94th in 2022.
Okay. So we got a kicker in the top 80 here. And then you get to the top 90, you get to the 80s. And we can't get T. Higgins into this list. We can get Chris Olave into this list?
No chance.
What are we doing?
And Olave ahead of Drake London is also insane. Just sticking with the receivers. Olave is 83rd, London 88th. What? No one's taking Olave over London or T for that matter.
And again, Olave is a good player. Don't get me wrong. Chris Olave is a good player. Nobody's taking Chris Olave, wide receiver, ahead of T. Higgins. But somehow that happened here in the voting. I just and Travis Kelce, awesome
Ooh.
player, awesome career.
Uh-oh.
Not a top 100 player to me at this point.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
who's better than him at tight end? McBride, Kittle, Bowers, maybe Andrews, maybe
Andrews is better.
Laporta,
I think Andrews is better now. Yeah, Laporta I would take.
maybe Hawkinson. Like Kelsey's still good, but he wasn't great last year.
Yeah.
He's starting to show those age-related decline aspects to his play. I think this is
Glad
maybe a
you
legacy vote for Travis Hunter
yeah.
or Travis Kelce.
Yeah. It's the exact opposite of Travis Hunter. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's the Travises. Travesty. Oh, that's a fun headline, right?
Mm.
But a boosh.
James is thinking about our YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. If we did that, yeah.
Our
But
thumbnails. Yeah.
I think I would take Mark Andrews over him. I think there are multiple guys now that are kind of passing him. And you know what? It's just funny. We're talking tight ends. Could you imagine if Eric All hadn't gotten hurt and was continuing to go down the path that he was going down? Maybe he wouldn't be in the top 100 this year because I don't think he would have been. But
No.
he could have been a guy that you're like, well, maybe he's in it next year.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he continued to climb, he would have been one of those guys. That just bummed me out thinking about how Eric All is not going to get a chance to, at least this season, to fulfill his potential.
Yep. It is a bummer. Hopefully we see him playing again next year. Jared Verse is the other one I would throw out there. It's a weird one. 57 for Jared Verse, who is going to, I think, be really, really good. Didn't quite have the productivity last year to justify a ranking quite that high to me.
I think it's because the Rams were good and the defense survived the non-Aaron Donald, and Jared Verse was the first round pick. Like he was good, but it wasn't like Jared Verse was the reason why they were awesome.
Yeah.
Solid on defense without Aaron Donald.
We'll make some improvements. I think the process can be improved year over year as this is our first try here as a network of doing a top 100. I think we'll get better, James. I think we'll make some improvements year over year. And get T. Higgins into the list. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a pretty cool project though overall. But that's what we thought about it. Wanted to share our honest thoughts about things as it related to the Bengals and some of the kind of weird stuff in the back of this list. Some of the inclusions there. I'm sure you have your own nitpicks that you can share in the comments as well. If you've seen this, you can find it, of course, on social media where it's been shared plenty. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Back to training camp previews and mock turtle soup, and then training camp is here. And that time of year, James, snuck up on us. Always does. We're excited to cover it. Some football is going to be happening outside of Paycor Stadium. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.